welcome to episode 24 of our Little Harbour Homewares shop project. Now, since the last episode I've managed to get quite a bit done, so let me show you what I've been up to. So I'm going to start off today by making those 9 shopping bags that I want to go along the top of the 3 units along the back wall, and I'm actually just going to use these 3 fabric designs. Now these 2 I didn't use for the bags upstairs, but I think they're really nice and bright and will create a really lovely impact as you look in from the front of the shop. So I've rounded off the corners of the base pieces and I've cut my fabric here, so now I just need to start hemming. So I've allowed for a 5mm hem top and bottom of each piece, and that will make the bag 30mm high, the same as the ones that we made for the upstairs. So I'll just begin by creasing in my hems. So I'm not doing a full sort of detailed tutorial on these, so I'm sure you all know how to make these bags by now. But if not, then do pop back to that shop episode. I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head, but I'll look that up and I'll put it at the bottom of the screen. So do pop back and have a look at that. And these are such a lovely little project, really easy to make, and you can use them anywhere. They look really nice in a kitchen with some groceries in. Little sort of bunch of flowers poking out, bottle of wine. They're really good fun to dress, but you can use them in craft rooms, you know, have them standing in a hallway or something like that. Doing that up round there. I like to angle them outwards a little bit. Really nice with that splash of yellow. Just even up those back joins. So I'll leave those to dry and then I'll add the handles once they're all completely dry. And there are the completed bags. And I'm really pleased with those colour combinations. With the yellow stripe, it's got like a little brown stripe in it as well. So I've used a brown sort of suede ribbon, I suppose. And I found this in my bits box and I didn't even know I had it. I don't know where it came from, but it's like the sort of fine glove leather, but it's got that sort of brushed suede on both sides. I really don't know where that came from, but that goes really well with that bag, and I'd really like that in full size for myself. And then with the ribbon, I don't know if you remember, but when we made the original bags, the glue had shown through the ribbon on a few of them, but because of the positioning, it didn't really matter too much. But what I did with these, and I found works, apply the glue to the bag, so you would put your sort of lines of glue up there like that, just let it dry off for about 30 seconds, and then attach the ribbon, and then you find that you don't get that glue coming through, or not as much anyway. But I really like those, so I'm going to put those into position now. I won't be gluing them into place yet because, as I said, I'll have to get the shop down onto my sort of main counter here so that I can actually get in and glue it all into place. Still got those little boxes to glue onto those top shelves as well, so I can do all of that at the same time. But I'm just really excited to get the bags into place now and see how they're going to look. I think they look really good. They really add a splash of colour to that sort of top area, which is what we needed. I really like those. So we really need to get that central shelf filled now. So that's what I want to start work on next. So since making those bags, yesterday afternoon I spent all afternoon online finding images and creating these PDF sheets, and I just wanted to say thank you everybody who put suggestions in the comments. I had a few ideas, but it was really good to get all of your input, because I would never have thought of the jigsaw puzzles or the calendars, CDs and loads of other things that you suggested and which I've created here. So what we'll do is I'll cut these all out and then I'll show you my ideas of sort of making them into the products. So I'll start with the jigsaw puzzles, and I just wanted to say thank you to Beth Gaither for suggesting those, because I would never have thought of those. So let me put all those to one side. And I've just really done a box cover, and then I've surrounded it with a colour that I've picked out of the picture. And then we're just going to wrap that around a piece of wood, as we've done in the past. So this coloured sort of background is probably a lot bigger than we're going to need it, but I wanted to put extra on because it's better to have extra and cut it away than to have, you know, bare wood at the back. So I'm going to start by cutting these out. So that's those cut out, and then for the actual box I'm using 2.5mm sheet wood, 3/32 of an inch, and the size of the box is 22 by 16mm. So you want to cut your piece to that size, and then we're just going to wrap the cover around the wood. So as we did before, we're going to cut along to each corner of the box like that. So we're creating those flaps right along level with the top and bottom of the box to start. And I've just done 10 of these. Obviously if you wanted some more you can just print that sheet off again. But if you want some sort of different designs and things of anything that I've created on those sheets, then I have got that video over on YouTube of how to create the packets and everything using Adobe Photoshop. So if you've got that program, then it's worth popping over and having a look at that video. Once you know, it's like anything, once you know how, it's quite easy to do and it's a lot of fun as well. And I've also linked to that video in the other bits and pieces tag here on Patreon, so you can find it there as well, which might be a bit easier. So do that with all of your boxes. So we're now ready to start sticking the labels around the piece of wood. I can't remember how I did it last time, but I'm just going to apply some glue to one side of the wood like that. And then stick it down right in the centre of the label. And then I'm going to apply the glue to the label flaps and then just glue them round. And I'll do one at a time because they are going to need trimming. Because as I said, I did that you know, the blue square around the outside, or the coloured square, I did a lot bigger than it needs to be. So top and bottom are just about okay. And then these ones will need trimming, so you can just dry them around dry like that. And then just snip off so they come to about the centre of the box. We're not going to be seeing this back bit. And what I actually want to do, so my sort of plan, is to get all of these bits made up, and then we'll do some little trial displays on that central narrow shelf, and then on the little island counter. We'll see what we've got and how much more we need, if we need anything more. And we probably will need a little bit more. I really want to fill them out. And I think just doing that then, I think last time I may have cut the flaps at a little bit of an angle so that you don't get anything showing from underneath, and as I sort of press that into place then I puckered it a little bit so it's a bit baggy at one side. So just sort of squeeze it all round to the back. If you do that, you'll probably be a lot neater than I am. And then I'm pushing those little bits up, but on the next one I'll just trim those tabs at an angle. But that looks like a puzzle, doesn't it? And there were some really nice ones in the Ravensburger puzzles, including, I've got somewhere here, it's called, that was called the Beach Hut. So I chose that one. I don't even suppose you can see that picture very clearly. Not sure if it's focusing in. But do go and have a look on Google, because they also do a range of sheds. And they've got a craft shed and a potting shed and a garden shed, and they're all these sort of you know, watercolour pictures, I suppose, but there's some really nice ideas in them. And not just for sheds but for, you know, your craft rooms and things. Yes, they had a sewing shed with like a tailor's dummy in it, and I didn't see them before I did my craft shed. But I just thought that was a really nice way of sort of getting ideas. So there's our first one. So let's do the second one, and I'll cut those tabs into more of a triangle. And I was sort of sat here cutting these puzzles out. I was just thinking how much fun it's going to be when we start creating all the food packets for the 1940s house. And I've told you about it before, but I've got a book which is by Robert Opie, and it's all about the 40s, and all it is a book filled, a really big book filled with pictures of food labels from that era, from that period. So we can use those as a guide, and then see if we can find, you know, actual packets on Google that we can then create into little packets. But that's going to be a lot of fun. And we need to make a lot of our own stuff as well, because obviously we'll need to make eggs and you know, potatoes and vegetables and things like that, because they would have lived off the land if they could in those days when food went onto the ration. And I haven't done too much research yet. I mean, it's a subject I've sort of been interested in for a long time anyway, because I love the style of the furniture and the clothes and everything back then. So I know quite a bit about it. But it will be good to learn some more about that period in history. And more really, like I say, about the furniture and the fashion and everything. Obviously there was a war going on at that time, so we will be talking about it, but that won't sort of be the focus of the series. I don't know what I'm trying to say really. You know, we want to keep it light. We don't want to focus too much on all the sort of horrible things that were going on, although, you know, we will obviously have to acknowledge that. Okay, so as you saw there, I just sort of trimmed those flaps off into more of a sort of triangle shape, and then that helps them wrap around a little bit neater. You can do that as well. And as long as you're not cutting too far in as I've done there, because then you get a little bit of the wood showing. I'll make sure I don't do that on the next one, and that one can go to the back of the shelf. I think what I'm going to do on that one is just pull that flap up a little bit and trim that off, because that one's overhanging quite a bit there. Yeah, so I'll carry on with the puzzles, and then we'll move on to the next sheet of labels. Okay, so I've covered all of my jigsaw puzzle boxes, But I just wanted to say, with this one with the sort of lovely blue border, when I created it, I allowed for a border around the front edge, so around the actual picture, but when I was cutting out my corners I didn't allow for that border, so hence now I've got a lot of bare wood. I'm going to find out my coloured pencils and just touch that in, but when you're cutting that one out, just leave that sort of millimetre border around the outside edge of the picture when you're sort of cutting into your corners. I went right up to the picture with mine, forgetting that I'd done that border, just because I really love that colour blue. I thought that would stand out really nicely. It's backfired on me a bit, but I'll touch that in anyway with some pencil. And then I've got shelves here, so these are the 2 shelves we're going to be filling. So these 2, if I just show you, the 2 bottom shelves on the narrow unit, because that's in the centre on that back wall, and then that will be standing in the centre of the shop. So when we look in, you're not really going to see those bottom shelves. We obviously still want to fill them, but we'll just be using, you know, filler pieces. So what I mean is you don't want to put all of your best or favourite pieces onto those 2 bottom shelves, but obviously we will still make it look nice. But we'll see what we've got. We'll dress all of the top shelves in this unit first, and then anything we've got left over we can use down there, or we can print off another one of the sheets and just recreate some of the bits just to fill those out. I'm just sort of going to stand the puzzles on here for now. And again, this is another sort of funny one, because we obviously want to dress the unit to the front, but in a real shop it would be dressed around all sides. So we might have some things facing out that way as well. But obviously, again, we don't just want it to look as though we've just put things at the front of the shelf and we've got all emptiness at the back. So we will fill them out as they would be in a real shop. So we could have some in there as well. Oops. And I was sort of planning on doing 3 of each item, but because there was an extra space on the sheet, I just did that extra one of that bottom puzzle there. So that's those, and then maybe we could have some stood at the top, create a little display, and we can create a little bit of height by standing things up like that. So that's going to be fun covering that. So I want to bring the next sheet in now. So I can't actually remember the numbers that I've put on each sheet, but if you just find the one that's got these sort of 9 larger squares at the top, and these are going to be our calendars. And thank you to Christine Davis for that suggestion. I think it's really nice to include calendars in projects where you can, and I've included them in a couple of my sheds as well, and actually put the year on them. And I've done that with these as well, if I can get that in close enough there. Is that focusing yet? So on each of them I've put Little Harbour Homewares 2022 calendar, and I think it's nice to get the year on them, because then you can look back and remember when you actually created the project. So what I want to do with these is actually back them onto a thin card first, and then we'll wrap some cellophane around them. So just cut out the 9 calendars, cut out that square. I've got here this thin white card, and I think this came out of a shirt or something like that, but it's a nice sort of thin card. So I'm going to apply glue to the back of the sheet of calendars and then glue that on there. And then once it's dried, we can cut them all out individually. I'll swap to my spreader there, make that a little bit quicker. Like that, and then just glue that down onto the card. Just smooth that on. I don't know if you can see any of those little sort of bits on there, but my cutting mats need replacing really, where I've cut through and all of the insides are coming out, so there's lots of little black bits coming out. I'm going to have to order a new one of those as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave those to dry now. So next I want to cut out the book covers, and that's most of this sheet here with these two large coloured squares at the bottom, and these I want to make some little envelopes from to match our writing sets. So it's all of the top part of that sheet. And then on this second sort of mixed sheet here, you've got the colouring books, which has got the lighthouse and the deck chair on. And then the other books on there are meditation books, so beach themed or seaside themed meditation books, and they were suggested by Tammy Con. I think that's a really nice idea. So I'm going to cut those out next, and I think we did these in the last episode where we just sort of wrap the covers around a piece of board, or a piece of wood rather. And again with these I've included more of the back cover than we're going to need, because obviously we'll only need sort of thickness of the book again and a little bit for a spine. But again, it's better to have more there than not enough. And on this shells one at the top, it is a very faint sort of white colour, but just, you know, just cut along so you're getting it about the same size as the book below if you can't see the outline there. And I've done these ones quite large, so these are 1 inch high, and in real life that would obviously be 1 foot high, so a sort of annual size. So again for the book covers I'm using the 2.5mm sheet wood, and earlier I said the books, or the larger books, were 25mm high or 1 inch, but they are actually 23mm high, so just under 1 inch. Now you are actually going to have to measure the front covers to get the size of your wood, so the actual widths of the covers will be different, and I'm not just trying to be difficult. When you're sort of sizing something on Photoshop, you put one size in, so in this case I use the height, and then it automatically sort of sizes the width so that it doesn't distort the picture or the writing. But just measure each of them. Some of them are slightly wider than others. Cut your piece of wood and then just bevel one long edge just to act as a bit of a spine. So I'll carry on now with the beveling, and then I'm just going to use an off-white coloured paint to paint around the edges again, just to create the illusion of pages. So I've rounded off all of the spines, and I've laid the wood pieces in order here to mirror the covers, so I know which one goes back on which piece. And then I've just got here, I've actually just got a tiny little bit of white paint left in here, and I'm going to go around the pages. And this doesn't take long at all to dry, so by the time I get to the last book I'll be able to start attaching the covers to these first ones. Okay, so just apply glue to the cover. Take your first book blank, glue that on. And feed it around. Square it up. I'm actually just going to let that dry off a bit before I snip that back bit off. Sometimes if you snip when the glue's still really wet, it sort of tears it a little bit at the back, so let that dry off and move on to the next one. So that's all of the books now covered. There was a lot of drying out in that nice sunny patch. And I'm just going to trim off the extra sort of wraparound piece like that. I'm really pleased with those. So that's all of the books covered as well, and I've popped them onto the shelves, but they're not necessarily going to stay there, but it just, as I said earlier, gives us a good idea of how much more we're going to need to fill the shelves. And then I've got the little colouring books on here, and I thought we could make some little stands and have some of those propped up. And again, that creates that bit of height on the top of the unit there. So that's those. And now I want to move on to the calendars, which Christine suggested. So we backed them onto card, and that's now dry. So again, we're just going to cut those out. And another thing I was going to say as well, when I was lining them up on, you know, onto the sheet in Adobe Photoshop, I do that by hand, so I try and get them as straight as I can. But when you're sort of cutting across, don't always assume that they're all in a perfect row. Some of them, especially on some of the other sheets I noticed, were just slightly out. So always just check what you're doing with your scissors before just sort of cutting, presuming that they're all straight. And I don't know of a way on Photoshop of lining things up like that. There probably is, I'm sure there is, but I just don't know how to do that, so I always just do it by eye. These though are lined up by the looks of it. Okay, so I've cut all of those out now, and what I want to do is wrap a piece of cellophane around each one. And this again just came from a packet. I think it actually had a greetings card in it. And you want something that isn't too thick so that you can actually wrap it round. And all we're going to do is cut a square. There's a little hole in it now, so I want to avoid that piece. So cut sort of around the calendar so that you've got a big enough flap to then fold onto the back. So I'm probably going to do about 1 centimetre there, and sort of go up like that. And it doesn't matter if they're not entirely covering the back. These scissors are going blunt. Still haven't got my new scissor set yet. They're like that. And then I've got my sellotape dispenser here. We're actually just going to stick these down at the back with a little bit of sellotape, just because it's easier than finding a glue that will work with this sort of material. We probably need to use like a 2-part epoxy or something like that, which is a lot of messing about, so we'll just use a bit of sellotape. We're not going to see around the back, so that's all right. And then what I thought I would do, let me find my smaller scissors. What have I done with them? Got my old crochet ones here. Is cut those corners out again, like we do with the paper covers. And then we can just go around the sides and then fold it over the back. You can just obviously fold it around, but it might make it a little bit bulky. Just go like that. Put all the corners out. I didn't realise you might not be able to see the cellophane even on camera. And then these little squares are just sticking to my fingers. So just go around at the sides. And just to make it easier, pop a little bit of tape on. Just pull off as little as you can. You can never just get a tiny bit out of a dispenser. Such a simple job, and I'm making such a mess of it. And then pull the top and bottom flaps down. Like a tiny little bit off there. Like that. That looks quite good, doesn't it? So it just sort of gives them that sheen. And they sort of always tend to come in packets like that. So it's a nice little finishing touch. But obviously you can just leave them you know, as the plain card if you haven't got any cellophane to use. So I'm going to do that with all of them, and then I want to have a go at making like a stepped box, so a box with like the 3 steps inside, so that we can display those perhaps like that. And then we'll put a little sign on the front saying 2022 calendars now half price or 50% off or something like that. That's the bit with the hole in it, so we'll need to cut a new piece there. So my calendars are all now covered with the cellophane. I think they look really good. And I've cut the pieces here to make a little angled box. So we're going to have it higher at the back and lower at the front. We'll shape these sides now. And I've based the size on the width of the calendar, just plus a little bit extra for each side, so they're not sort of crammed in there. And then I sort of put them together like that, quite loosely, just to get the depth. And then I just did the height, so we've got a bit of support at the back, and so that the front is low enough so that we can see the lovely beach huts on the front calendar. And then we'll work out where to put the little steps on the inside, and we'll probably only need one for that back one to stand it up, because the front one is obviously shorter than the second one, so we've already got the sort of step there, if you know what I mean. Okay, so push those all to one side and take your first side piece, and we're going to make a little pencil mark 7mm across the top edge. And I'm just thinking, have your grain running from top to bottom, so these pieces are square, but have it so the grain is running from top to bottom, and then do your first little pencil mark 7mm from this right hand edge, and that means we've still got our grain running in the right direction. And then what will be this front edge here, so turn and do another 7mm pencil mark there, and that's where our little front panel will sit across. So 7mm in from the right and 7mm up from the bottom there, and in inches that is 9/32 of an inch. I have to use my pencil like that so I can get it to line up. And then we're just going to cut diagonally across there, so you're cutting in front of your pencil marks, so that we're actually keeping that measurement on the wood. So what to do with my knife? There it is, back in the pot. So hold your rule nice and tightly, just do a gentle score, and then you can go in a little bit deeper. You're sort of cutting against the grain here, so it is a little bit more difficult. Just be careful of your fingers again. Like that. So do that with the other side as well. So with the grain from top to bottom. My eyes are really tired today. I don't know if you experience it when you sort of don't wear glasses all the time and just need them for close work. I keep sort of putting them on and taking them off, and I can't seem to get comfortable with them today. I'm still not entirely used to them. It was only on my last eye test that I actually had to have prescription glasses. So it takes some sort of getting used to for me. Sometimes I forget to put them on and my eyes start aching, and then I put them on and they sort of still ache, so I'm trying to sort of force myself to wear them a bit more often. Okay, so we can now construct this piece, and it's just the same really as a drawer. So we're going to attach the sides, then the front and back. Let's clear my desk. Okay, so apply the glue to each side of your base piece. That noise in the background is Matt whisking eggs. Having a scrambled egg for lunch. Fancied something warm today, so it's gone a bit overcast again today. It's been really nice for the last few days. So touch those like that. I'm just going to bring that piece of strip wood in, or those pieces of strip wood rather, just to press against the sides. Like that. The angled part I was just thinking isn't as neat as I'd like, but I'll give that a sand once the piece is constructed and the glue has dried. I think I had trouble cutting that edge, so I must have had a bit of a knot in it. Sometimes that doesn't give you a very nice sort of edge. So just let that dry off just for 20 seconds or so. So once that's dried off enough that you can handle it without it falling apart, apply glue to the back and front edges. And you could probably quite easily make a box like this using a card, a stiffer card. I prefer working with wood, but if you're sort of comfortable working with card and think you can get all those angles and everything right, then, you know, use card by all means. Do exactly the same job, and that will save having to paint it as well. Probably be quite easy to work out, but I was just thinking it would be much easier just to do it using wood, and I know exactly sort of what sizes to cut it all then. I might have a go at a card one. I want to make a little sort of steeped box as well for the greetings cards that we're going to be doing. So press those together. I just need to push the side bits in to get it all to sort of square up. Make sure your back piece is touching those sides all the way up. Just notice that mine was sort of a bit loose at that top corner. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to dry off now and go and have my lunch. And then when I come back, we'll shape some of these edges, so we can shape along that front edge and along these corners up here. And then we can apply a coat of paint. So I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so once you've allowed enough time for the glue to dry, sand that on both sides, so hold it flat against your sandpaper. Go around in nice small circular motions. I've already done mine. And then you can sand on the bottom as well in the same way. And then bring in a small piece of sandpaper. And I just want to go along that front edge. And I'm just going along at a 45-degree angle there, just to sort of shape that a bit, blend it in a bit more with those sides. Just really get rid of that sharp line along the front edge there. And then what you can do is sand those sides to neaten those off. And round over that little corner at the top there. So just sweep the sandpaper over like that, do that on both sides. So now bring in your calendars and just pop them in. So I want the blue at the back like that, and then the green, and then the blue again, so to sort of divide those colours. So the front two are fine, and then we want those back ones just standing up a little bit like that, so just raised. So I think we're going to be able to use just a piece of 6x3 strip in there, or maybe 5x5, just to make sure that they're not going to be slipping back in. So let's cut a piece of 5x5 strip to go in there, and that will be the same width as the base piece, which was 28mm wide. I haven't got the inch measurement here, so let me give you that as well. 1 1/8 of an inch. And I'm just going to cut mine with my handheld guillotine, just because it doesn't matter in this instance if we do just round over the end slightly. But when you're cutting strip with a guillotine, I should have made that cut. Actually, it's gone nice and straight on that one, but sometimes it can round over one end. So if you're using it for legs and things, obviously you want that to be nice and square. That's actually worked, so just make sure that that fits. I'm going to need to sand a little bit off that. and then that will just glue into place right in that back corner there. So let's do that now. Got a little bit of glue on my card there still. So apply the glue to two edges, adjacent edges. Pop that into place. Give it a press. Okay, so that can be left to dry, and then we can apply a coat of paint. And I think I'm just going to use the Vancouver again, so the same colour as my unit. Okay, so I've given that one coat of paint. Once that's dry, I'll give it a gentle sand, and then we can display our calendars. And I'm also going to do that little label to go across the front there, saying calendars 50% off. Okay, so the little calendar display box is now dry, so I'm going to glue the calendars into place, and I wanted to put the blue at the back there, so I'm just really going to put a little bit of glue on that plinth in there, and then some on the base as well. We'll see how that works. And I was having a think as well, I used that cellophane to cover the calendars, but I have actually a large roll of sticky back plastic left over that I used for my crochet box, used to cover it. So you could use that if you've got some sticky back plastic, and that would probably be easier to apply as well. I'll just get something a bit flatter to spread that out in there, because you wouldn't need to use the sellotape then. Okay, so spread glue around the bottom. I gave this a sand as well. So I want the blue ones at the back there. Actually, thinking about it, I'll just pop a little bit of glue on the inside of the back as well. Just anything to sort of hold them in place, so they're not going to be falling about. Down there like that. Thinking as well, I may just need to pop a little bit of glue in between. Let's just pop a little bit in there. And then these sort of front calendars, I want to be a little bit more spread out to actually fill the rest of the box. I'm just going to try and actually stand those in there and lean them back. Like that, that looks good. And then those in the front there. Thinking as well this would be a good way to do one of those, you know, record units. You know, sort of LPs and things used to go and flick through in the old record shops. I'll let that dry off for a moment, and if they're all sort of trying to spring forward, I might just have to put a little bit of tacky wax in between some of them just to get them to lay back a little bit. But I think that looks quite good. And then what I've done as well is just done a little label here. 2022 calendars 50% off, and I made that, I just did that in Photoshop. I'll try to add it, we'll probably have more labels and things, so I'll probably do up another sheet and I'll add that on, but if not I'll add it onto one of the existing ones if I can. And I made it 6mm high and our front piece is 7mm, so that will be just tall enough. Let me just cut that out, trying to get as close to the writing as I can. And then stick that to the front of the box. Let's try and stick that centrally. Is that about right? Wait a bit. Trouble with paper is once it's stuck, and you find if you try to move it about you might end up ripping it, so try and get it in the right place to start. I like that. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the CDs, and thank you Nina East for this suggestion, who suggested some meditation CDs. And I think that's a really nice idea. And the CDs are those 6 little squares on there, and I've done 3 of each. So from 1.5mm sheet wood, 1/16 of an inch, cut 6 squares measuring 9.5mm, and that's 3/8 of an inch. So our little boxes are 8.5mm square. And then I want to paint these black, and then the black will sort of represent the case going around the outside. So we'll just have a little black border showing around each of these covers, and that will hopefully look like the plastic case. And then I just want to make a really simple little either wooden or cardboard tray for these to sit in on the counter. So I'll go and find my black paint. So we need to paint these on one side around the edges, and then sort of onto the other side as well, so we've got that little bit of black border showing around the actual image. If we were only painting one side, we could have stuck them to a piece of masking tape, but when you are sort of doing small little fiddly bits like this, get hold of them with a pair of old tweezers, and then you can do it that way, and just sort of twist it round in the tweezer then to get to all the bits that you need to. Still a little bit messy, but it's better than doing it in your fingers and ending up covered in paint. And then I need something to stand these on. I think I've just spotted something. So I've got a plastic tray here that I have some bits of wood in. Remove the camera a bit, right sort of down on the thing there. So I've got a plastic tray, and I'm just going to stand them on there in the little grooves, and then hopefully they won't stick to it. And then move on to the next one. I've only got a tiny little bit of this paint left as well, and it's going a little bit claggy, but you can just put a tiny little drop of water in with this emulsion. I might have said that, I don't even know if it was earlier on in the episode, but that sort of makes it, you know, nice again. A bit more runny, I was going to say, but you know, not runny, but less thick and claggy. You know what I mean. So whilst those pieces are drying, I want to go back to the actual CD covers. And to give them that sort of shiny cover look, I want to cover them in sticky back plastic, and this is what I spoke about earlier using for the calendars. Now, I don't know if that's what it's called in the US or other countries. You might know it as sort of clear contact paper, but it's basically just a sort of sticky layer of paper stuck to a backing. So that's what I want to try and use. If it isn't called sticky back plastic or contact paper in those other countries, then please do comment below what it's actually called to help the other little bitsers. And I'm just really going to lay that in there. Hope this works, and then stick that down, and then cut around. Just realised I was off camera there, I can't redo it either now. And I've just sort of stuck the paper in there in between the backing and the actual sticky back plastic. And really sort of press it down. Use a nail if you can. And then I want to cut the covers out. And it just sort of gives it that look that they're stuck behind plastic. And this is one of those sort of weird things. When I was doing this, even though I have an eye for 12th scale, before I cut these I was thinking, oh, they'll measure probably about ½ an inch or so. But if you scale down a sort of standard CD cover, it just comes out at 8.5mm, which I thought looked really, really tiny, but that's the 12th scale size, so... It's weird, isn't it, sometimes? You think things are going to be bigger in your mind's eye. And if you ever sort of have that feeling, don't be tempted to make things larger just because you think they should look a little bit larger. because that's sort of how you create that true 12th scale, and it will look more realistic in your scene. I had that when I made the little bread bin. I was designing the bread bin for the Making Miniatures Doll's House book, and I just measured our own pine roll top bread bin in the kitchen. And when I scaled it down, I thought, no, that's too small, I'll do it a bit bigger. And I actually did make it, and I put it onto a kitchen unit, a 12 scale kitchen unit. It just looked too big. So always go with the measurements rather than, you know, what you think it should look like. You might not have that, but I did, and especially with these CD cases. Okay, so I'm going to actually leave those cases to dry for a little bit longer because I don't want to be getting black paint all over my fingers. So we'll move on to another one and then come back to these. Okay, so on this sort of part sheet that we've got left here, I've got my writing paper and the little bands to go around the writing paper sets, and then some postcards. So thank you to Joyce Fuller for suggesting the postcards, and to Kathy Walsh as well for suggesting that I put Matt's painting on a card. And I'm not sure if you meant a greetings card or a postcard, but I've put them here on the postcards and I think they look really good. So what I want to do now is just cut the postcards away. And I'm not sure if I'm going to back those onto card or just leave them as paper, because they would be quite thin. We don't want them to look too bulky, but then I don't want them just to look like bits of paper either. So I'll probably try and find a really thin piece of card to put those on, and then we could do a similar little tiered box to put those in. I think that might look quite nice. So I'll pop those to one side for now. So I've got here the writing paper and the bands, and I want to make up some writing paper and envelope sets. So what I did as well was took the blue from there and the sand colour just to do a couple of squares, so we've got some paper to make some little envelopes, but I'm not sure if these squares will be enough. But you might have some nice coloured paper. It doesn't have to be these exact shades. I can't speak this evening. But any sort of nice pale blues or greens or something you could use for the envelopes for these. But I'll show you how I'm going to fold the envelopes. So let's cut these out as well. Okay, so that's those cut out, and I want to make 6 packs of each. So I only want to use the printed sheet for the front of each pack. So what I've done here is just grid up some plain white paper, and I think this is about 100 GSM. It's slightly thicker than the normal 80 printer paper, and the writing paper measures 23 by 17 millimeters, and that's 29 32 of an inch by 21 32 of an inch. So mark up your paper like that, and then I've done it so we can have 3 plain sheets behind each front sheet, and then we'll put a little envelope on the front and then put the little bands around them. So cut out your plain paper, or if you've got, you know, a nice thin coloured paper, you could use that. And if your scissors as well are sticking a little bit after cutting that sticky back plastic, then just give them a wash using some washing up liquid, and that will get rid of the stickiness. So to put the paper sets together, just a little blob of glue in the centre of each of your 3 plain pieces. Line them up as best you can. You only need a little bit in the centre, and then you can put your sort of header sheet on. It's just to give them that sort of look of a bit of depth there. I suppose you could just back them onto a piece of white card if you wanted to, rather than cutting all the individual sheets. And don't worry, you've got that little lump of glue in the middle, because that's going to be hidden by the envelopes. So do that with each little set. I actually think I like the look of having more than one piece of paper back there. Adds for a little bit more realism. But, you know, it depends how much time you've got to spend on it. Okay, so for each writing set we're going to make one little folded envelope. Not with the sort of triangle flaps, but we're just going to make it so that we can fold over the top, bottom and sides to make it again look like a little bit like a thicker envelope rather than just a piece of paper. So you want to cut your template 30mm wide by 26mm high, and that is 1 3/16 of an inch wide by 1 1/32 of an inch high, and we can actually get 6 out of these little squares, which is quite good. So I'm going to sort of draw up the templates on the back, and these really don't have to be perfect, so I'm just going to do some rough lines around them like that. And even the lines I've done on them, you know, you don't need to transfer, we're just going to fold the sides in. So just really roughly mark up your sheet like that. Cut those out. Each one of those gives us one envelope to fold. So the actual face of the envelope measures 14mm by 10mm, and that is 3/8 of an inch by 9/16 of an inch. So again, use that 100 GSM card to cut a little template, and then we're just going to glue that into the middle of the coloured part of the envelope. Fold the sides around, no need to glue. Use my smaller scissors here. Cut away at the sides, just up to your little template in there. You should just be able to see a little line of the template inside the coloured paper. If you can hear banging out there, it's Matt. He's making like a garden seat. Hopefully he'll have it finished before this episode and I'll show you, but it's looking really good so far. But sorry about the noise. And then cut off those sort of little inside flaps. Don't have to be super neat because this is all going to be hidden at the back. And the only reason we're doing this triangle flap is otherwise you'll sort of fold the flaps back and you'll still be able to see the sides. So then just put a bit of glue on each of the triangles. Fold again. Bring in your writing pad. Glue the envelope in the centre. And you could put more paper behind it if you wanted to, but I think that looks fine, just the one there. You don't want it to look too bulky. Like that. Get rid of any excess glue, probably put a little bit too much on there. And then cut out one of your strips. And the writing on these is so tiny, but if you can't read it, then where you've got the longer sort of lettering at the bottom, that's the bottom. So that says writing paper and envelopes, that needs to go at the bottom. So apply glue to the back of the strip. And then stick that across the middle. And the writing fits just on the inside of the envelope. That's how you can line it up. Like that. And then just tuck it round like that. And that's our little writing sets. I think they look really good. And I've only done the 2 of these, but you could do these in lots of different little, you know, different pictures and different colour combinations. So the battery has started to flash, so I'm going to finish these off, and again we'll make some sort of little box or tray for these to go in as well. So my CD boxes are now dry, so now I just want to stick the covers onto the boxes. I'm using tweezers to hold them because it just makes it easier to get the glue on. And then I'm just going to stick that centrally on there, so I've got that little bit of a black border all around the outside of the cover there. Get rid of that excess glue. There, that sort of looks like a CD, doesn't it? I'm going to get these on and then we'll have a go at making a little box for them. And I just actually want these sitting on the counter. Okay, so I've just been having a go at making a little cardboard box for the CDs, and I'm really not happy with it. So I went through the whole sort of process of showing, showing the process, and then I had to sort of trim the box a bit, and it's just made it a bit of a mess really. So if you did want to have a go at making a box from card, then just make a template as you would just like a square, just like a normal sort of food packet box. So if you imagine that front bit is still there, and then you'd have your flaps that fold under at the bottom. And then I just basically cut down the sides, cut an angle at the sides like that, and then cut away your front section so you can actually see the CDs. To get the size, just measure across the front of the 2 CDs and then probably add on about 1/2 millimetre so you've got room for them. And then I just did it 5 millimetres deep, or just under 1/4 of an inch deep. But I don't like how that looks. I don't think it looks neat enough and square enough. But I'm not really very good at making things from card. I prefer using wood, so I'm actually going to remake this now using wood. So if you'd rather do a wooden one as well, then I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so I've cut here the pieces for the CD box, and I think I'll just be able to get a much neater finish using the wood. But do use the card if you're sort of comfortable making things with card. So I've given the measurements for these as well in the cutting list, and I just want to begin by shaping the sides. So turn it lengthways, and we're going to come up at the front there by 3 millimetres or 1/8 of an inch, so the same height as the front piece there. And then cut from there to that back corner. So we're just doing that angle again. So 3 millimetres up along one long side. Cut up to the corner there like that. Same with the other one. I should have probably just done this in the first place, but I wasted quite a bit of time on that cardboard box. I'm just not as comfortable using card as I am using wood. Okay, and then I just want to shape the sort of top corners of that. So let's just use a piece of 180 in our hands and just sweep over that top corner, just to round it off a little bit. Do that at each corner. Okay, so now let's glue this together. So as always, applying glue to each side of the base. Oops, that's the sandpaper stuck to my sleeve. Attach the sides so that your lower piece is sort of at the front, but obviously facing the same direction on both. Probably didn't need to say that. On there as well. I'm just going to get those spare pieces of strip so I can give those a press together without just sort of squashing it all. Sort of squares it up as well. And then I'll just let that dry off just for 30 seconds or so, and then we can attach our front and back pieces. That's now dry enough to handle, so apply glue along the front edges. We'll just do these one at a time, so do your front first, and it will be a little bit more sturdy to attach the back. And it's just easier doing it that way when you're working with a smaller piece. Press that into place. Bring that back in, give it a press. I'll pop one at the back as well, so I can get a bit of leverage. Don't worry if you've got any little sort of overhangs or anything, because again we'll sand along that front edge and along the sides once it's completely dry. Pop that down again. That side looks like it's going in a bit of an angle, so you can just carefully pull them out if you need to. And glue the back bit on. Strips in again. Give that a good press, and then I'm just going to slide that over there. Once that's dry, I can give it a nice sand, get it all nice and tidy, and then I'll apply some paint and we can actually glue the CDs into place. I'm going to go and print that label as well, and I'll start up that next sheet because I had something else to put on, didn't I? I can't remember what it was now, but I've saved it, so I'll put that on as well. And whilst that's drying, I just want to show you what I've asked Matt to do today. So I've asked Matt to do another couple of paintings for the wall at the side of the cash register, and then we're going to have the little local artist sign beneath them, and that's looking really good already. And what are you painting that with? Because you said you weren't going to use oils.
No, I'm just using acrylics today. So it's like oils, it's the same sort of consistency, but it dries just much faster.
Yeah. And you've got a tiny detailing brush there.
Yeah, it's one of these tiny brushes you get with, like, you can use for model kits, etc. And I'm also using just some of your brushes I printed out of your box.
Oh, you did you?
Yeah.
That's looking really good.
Thank you.
So you're going to do two that size, aren't you?
Yeah.
And then I can put them into a little display on the wall in there. So thank you very much for that, Matt.
Okay.
So once that's completely dry, sand on both sides, and I just did that on the sandpaper like that, so just holding it quite firmly, going along in the one direction like that. I also sanded it on the bottom, make sure you've got a nice flat bottom. And then you can go along that front piece again, just to sort of round that off, take that sharpness away. That's now ready for paint. So for my little CD box, I'm using this lovely blue, which is called Menton. And I forgot I had this, but it's quite similar to the writing that I'm using for the label, and similar to one of the blues on the actual CD label. So I think that will look quite nice. Okay, so my little CD holder is now dry. I really like that colour. And now I'm going to glue the CDs into place. So let's just put a little bit on the bottom of each one, and this is another case of having to really check which way around it goes because it's so difficult to see. That at the back there. Might need tweezers for this bit. And choose your nicest ones to go at the front as well. So if you've got any that are a little bit off, or just one that looks nicer than another, have that at the front. Wouldn't that be awful if I couldn't actually fit them in side by side? It's actually quite a nice fit, quite a tight fit. And then you don't want too much gap in at either side, so I'm quite pleased with that. Which is, of course, how I planned it. So there's the little box of CDs there. They're all stuck into place. I think they look quite good. So I'm going to lay that down, and then I've got here the little label. Sounds of the Ocean CDs, $9.95. Why that takes so long to come into focus, the writing. Let's just hold it there for a second, see if it focuses. No, but it does say Sounds of the Ocean CDs, £9.95, which I thought was quite a good price. And then I've put this label, and the other one was the half-price calendars, and I've also put that one onto a sheet of tea towels that you can print onto fabric. And the tea towels were the idea of Alison Craig, who says she always buys a tea towel whenever she's on holiday. So I thought they'd be nice to have in the shop, and I'll show you those next. So that's that there, and that colour of that font I used is actually exactly the colour of that paint. That's worked out really nicely. Now I want to put these on the counter, so I'm actually going to apply a bit of glue to the bottom of the box. And we're going to use a little bit of artistic license here, because obviously the CDs would be facing out into the shop. But we're going to sort of angle them a bit so we can see them from the front of the shop. So let's put these into place. Come with me, if you will, across my very messy desk. We sort of have them there, next to the sweets, at a bit of an angle. And I think the customers would be able to see those as well. I just like being able to see them from the front of the shop. It's those, one of those sort of impulse buy things that you always have near the counter in shops, especially sort of sweets and things like that. I really like that blue. Really stands out. There. Of course, I'm being silly again because I should have just brought the counter over and done it on the desk instead of hurting my back. But yeah, I like that. So before we move on to our next sheet of labels, I just want to have a bit of fun now. And you may remember in the last episode, I talked about having a little poster in the doorway of the shop with a local pub advertising a band that would be playing on Friday night, and I asked you to help me choose some names, and I've had some really great ones through. So I've got in here the pub names, and I've got in here the band names, and Matt is going to do me up the poster, so he said if I could choose one pub name, obviously, and then 3 band names, and he'll make that into a little poster for the door. So let's go for the pub name first. I'll give them a shake. This is fun. Okay, what's it going to be? The Sea Shanty, and that was chosen by Adele Cannon. And you may remember that Adele actually chosen the name of the shop as well. So she's really good with coming up with these names. And there were some really good ones in there as well. And then let's choose 3 band names then. I like that, the Sea Shanty. Okay, one here. Long piece of paper. It's from Marriott Young. Figures on a Beach. So that's one of the bands. The Winkle Pickers from Lynn Forgy or Forgy. Sorry Lynn if I've got your surname wrong. Another good one there. One more. Winkle Pickers. And Margot Reppert has chosen the Sandpipers, which is also a really good name. Sounds like a sort of folk band, doesn't it? So we've got our 3 bands there and our pub name, and I just want to read some of these other band names out just because they're worth a mention. Captain Matt and the Mackerels, which came from Christina Davis, who also came up with some really good ideas for the shop as well, bits to add into the shop, so thank you Christina. Another one from Christina here. Captain Kidd and the Salty Sailors. I love doing these. We'll have to do some more of these. The Sand Dunes from Alison Craig. Thank you, Alison. Another good name. Blue Oyster Clan from Jude Eccles. And I think this is Jude as well. I'm pretty sure she sent a couple in. Yep, Jude Eccles again, the Blue Cockled Cult. So all really good names there. You're all really good at coming up with these sort of pun names. So thank you for doing that. I'll pop those back in there. We'll have to think of something else where we come up with, you know, some other little names and things. So I'll go and give these to Matt and he can make the little poster up. So I gave Matt those names and in return he gave me these. So really, really pleased with those. So they're still wet at the moment, but they'll be completely dry tomorrow, so I'll put them into place tomorrow with the existing one and then do a little label up saying local artist Matt Warren and put some prices alongside those. But isn't he good?